Well, here's one that we haven't done in all the quick tips that we've been doing. This person says, how does an artist decide on what colors to use for a painting? I hear you talk about color a lot, and I watch a lot of painting videos on YouTube, but most painters just tell what colors they're using, but don't tell why. Well, this is a really good follow-up from our quick tip 431 on identifying your tube colors. Stay tuned. Well, did you know we painters have a tool that can go a long way towards helping us choose the right colors for doing a painting? But a lot of painters don't even use it, and that's the color wheel. I know there are a lot of color wheels available now, but all you need is a simple traditional color wheel. And if you don't have one, you can go to our website at diannemize.com, Dianne with two N's. And we have a free one there that you can, a PDF of a free color wheel that you can download, and there you've got it. Just clicking free stuff in the menu. But back to the question this person asked, how do you decide what colors to choose for your paintings? All right, so I'm going to show you how I do that using the color wheel. Now, the color wheel is something that I depend upon religiously. I consider it just as essential to me as my brushes are, because it is our diagram of color. Our diagram of color. And color is our main communication tool when we're painting. And so the color wheel then, when we learn how to use it and refer to it, can help us solve a lot of problems that have to do with color. So here's how I go about that. And you give it a try and then see if it works for you. It's just a simple little process. If it works for you, then you might consider using this method. Now, as I said earlier, this is sort of a follow-up from quick tip 431 called identifying tube colors, because it's a good thing to know what your tube colors have in them in the way of characteristics of what they can do in color mixing, in order to be able to know what colors to use for your painting. So let's begin with just a simple subject like this. A hen in an environment of grass and weeds, that sort of thing. So let's begin with one color. Now, normally your subjects are going to have several colors. Sometimes only one, sometimes two, sometimes three, and sometimes even more. But I think if you start with this method, using a subject that's limited in the number of colors, you'll find how easy it is, and that makes it then easier for you to use subjects that have more colors in them. So let's begin. So what colors are we looking at? So if I look at this, I see two major colors. I see the green, that's a color category. And I see, what would you call that? A lot of people say, well, that's burnt sienna. Burnt sienna is not a hue, so that's where we start. If we start by identifying a color we're looking at according to a tube color, we're going to limit ourselves as to what we can do in order to paint that. In other words, we may run into blocks where it's just a guessing game. But if we can identify the hue that's in this, then we will have a better chance. And if we know what hues are in our tube colors, we have a better chance of really setting up a limited palette that can give us every color we see. So let's start with the green, and then I'll get to what color this hen is after I do the green. So let's start. So we got a green, when most folks would just reach for a green. Whoa! It's not just green, but it's a specific green that we see most of. Look at the color wheel. Now the color wheel, the traditional color wheel, has 3 greens on it. It has a green that we call green, that's hue, just registers green. Then it shows us the green that leans towards yellow, and that we call yellow-green, that's the hue. And it has another one called blue-green that leans towards blue. And you see these are the hue names, yellow, green, blue, and so on around the color wheel. And those are the words that best guide us for choosing our colors. So, do I see all these greens in here? So let's start doing. I see I have lots of yellow-green. Now my eyes identify that as green that leans towards yellow. And it looks like some of these yellow greens lean a little bit more towards yellow than others, but they're still yellow greens. Do I see any blue greens? Yes, I do. There's blue green in the shadow areas right in there. And there's some blue greens in the shadow areas back here. So I see a range of greens. So then how do I select colors to go on my palette for that range of greens that I see? All right, think about the greens that you have in your tubes. Now, each of us has a different collection of tubes. Some people have thousands, not really, but dozens of tubes. Others have fewer tubes. But look at what greens you have in your tubes. Now, since I wouldn't make the quick tip way too long if I explored all the greens that are available, so I'm just going to narrow it down to one, show you how to look at it, and then how you can use it. So we have, when you think about the greens, you also need to think about, that's the hue that we identified on the color wheel. We also need to consider, before we make a selection, the values. How dark, how light, or how dark are the colors we see. Because we've got to have that potential too. So we see lots of dark in the blue greens here. And we do see some darks, darker than, we see variations in the green in the yellow greens. So that tells us that we need a really, really dark green. And a dark green that's transparent rather than opaque is going to give you a broader range of darks. It's going to go into a deeper ability to get dark. Okay, now at this point, once you identify the value of the green and you identify the hue of the green, the value you can identify by your value scale. That's another tool we have available to us that we often forget to refer to. So we want an ability to go dark. And that would mean that we need to choose a green that comes out of the tube. I'm thinking in the general category of green now. What greens do we have that are the darkest possible dark we can go? Well, 2 I can think of would be phthalo green and the Rembrandt brand of Viridian. They're very similar in their darkness. The phthalo green is a very strong tinting strength. Refer back to a previous quick tip on that. The Rembrandt Viridian is a more manageable tinting strength, so that's the one I'm going to choose. That is actually a green that I keep on my palette, and I keep it right here. Now, you see how dark that is, so I'll just put some of that right there. Now, I need to identify what hue that green is. As the dark, transparent green, if I started out with a sap green, which is, the brands of sap green, like the Daniel Smith sap green, are really, really dark. Other brands of sap green tend to be lighter on the value scale. So sap green would be another one I could choose. And I could go through the process the same way I'm going to go through the process here and come up with the colors I need. All right, so if the color is really dark like that, I need to identify which of these greens it is so that I'll know what to do with it. Now I'm really breaking this down. I'm giving you the anatomy of color, of how color works, so then you could make that decision. So far what have we done? We identified the general category, green, and now we're boiling down to which green. Now we've got the blue-green selected. We have potential for blue-green here, but we're seeing yellow-green. But we can take this blue-green and we can turn it to a yellow-green. Now we can do that if we want to turn it to a yellow-green that's really dark. We can do that by adding into it another color that's going to turn it dark. I'm going to take another route. I'm going to take the long way around this just to show you how this principle works. So I'm going to go directly for yellow. And I'm going to add yellow-green. Yellow, this is my hint's a yellow light. Cadmium yellow light will do. Any one of the yellows that is as close as possible to what we call spectrum yellow. That's how it registers on the best color wheels. So if I add yellow into this, then I'm going to change that to yellow-green. I'm also going to change the value because that yellow is so much lighter. But I can look here and I can see that those yellows are lighter, and so that in that case that would work fine. Now if that's not the case, if that yellow-green was very, very dark, the yellow-greens I'm seeing here, then starting with sap green would be a better idea. But I wanted to take you through and show you how this works. So there we go. Now, it's not quite yellow-green. That registers more on green. You see this? So let's get it yellow-green. Let's lean it towards, get it out of that green zone and into the yellow-green zone. And you notice that's because I'm adding that yellow to it, how it's also getting lighter in value. You see it right here. The value, as we add a lighter color, we get a raise in value. So I'm going to keep adding the yellow now until I get this yellow-green. If you were using phthalo green here, it would take about 4 times more yellow. There we go. We're leaning it now towards yellow-green. Let's see. Okay, it's a darker value, of course. This is a lighter value. It's a darker value, but I'll just put a little bit of that on the canvas right here and show you that's still more yellow-green. Now, if I could turn it even more yellow, because it's exactly the yellow-green I'm looking for. Well, let's just do that just for fun. Okay, now, this is still selecting color. This is my experiment for you to show you the process of selecting color. All right, now that really registers more yellow-green. But there's one other consideration, and that is not only what hue is it. Now we've got down to there's a yellow-green hue. What value is it? We have potential for dark here. We see that's some light to middle value. We see most of the yellow-greens. But what saturation is it? How much of that yellow-green does this have in it? So you can see the saturation here is a lot higher. In other words, there's much more yellow-green present in this hue yellow-green than there is here. So what do we do about that? Well, if you go across the color wheel to red-violet, you can add a little bit of red-violet in there, and then you can get that yellow-green. But that red-violet must be in the same value range, or it won't turn that, it'll change the value as well. So I'm going to go to red-violet, and I'm going to go directly to red-violet on my palette. And I'll just do this right across here now to show you the progression. So I want to, first of all, before I put this in here, I want to raise that value just a little bit. So I'll put a little bit of white in it, and let's just raise it to be in this value range right here. Now watch what happens. Just put those two side by side there. All right. Now as I pull a little bit at a time of this into this, you can watch it change. And you can see as it changes saturation. Now what I'm actually doing there, I'm subtracting yellow-green out of the hue. In other words, what I see in this pile right there is not the same amount of hue as this is. By putting the complement into this, I have subtracted out this, some of the strength of that. Now let's use the brush now. Let's just compare it here. Okay, you see I already have Well, I'll show you even better. Use my little test strip here, and we'll put a little bit of this yellow green on the test strip. And you see what I have here? I have exactly the value I need of this yellow green in the kind of shallow shadow areas we see there. I have that range. I have that saturation. Now, to raise that, to get it a lighter value, this particular yellow green right here, to get that to a lighter value, then I would just need to add two things, white and yellow. Now, we'll add yellow first into this to get the lighter value. Right there. Let's see if that gives it to us. See, I'm very, very close there. Maybe instead of the white, let's go back to the yellow again, because sometimes the yellow itself will end up adding too much saturation. But see how close that is? Now, if I add the white into that, there we go, right there. I betcha. I'm in the neighborhood of where I need to be. There you go. You see that? See how close that is? Now, so then we ask that question, but what about this? What do we do about that? Okay, now watch real closely what I'm going to do here. There's the blue-green again, and the blue-green has a complement as well. Now what we see about the blue-green is we see that it, as blue-green, is very saturated. I'm going to rinse the brush out so I can be sure I get that right. Alright, so here's the blue-green, and you see how saturated that is? That is really rich, a real rich blue-green. Alright, that tells me that the blue-green I'm seeing here is not that saturated. So what can I do? Look at this. Blue, green, red, orange. That tells me if I add a little bit of red, orange back into blue, green, that's going to desaturate it and put it back to what I need. Watch this. This is where knowing your tube colors comes in handy. Do you have a red, orange? Well, here's a red, orange. That is the cadmium red light. But you see the value of it's different. But I have another red orange. This one right here. Now burnt sienna is a red orange. That would do it. Burnt umber is a red orange that leans more towards red, but it's way desaturated. So if you know that about your tube color, you would say, nah, probably not burnt umber. So if I pull this is the transparent oxide red. This is red orange. Now watch what happens here. If I pull this into the yellow green, just a little bit now, because the tinting strength of that is very high. But if I pull that into the blue green, I meant to say, if I pull that into the blue green, the yellow that's in the red orange and the yellow that's in the green or blue green cause it to lean more towards yellow green. Let me show you that now. Now, I may have lost you by now because I've gone through a really dissecting of what color does to color. Let's see here. Let's just put that right here. And you see how much that changed? I didn't get enough on the brush. See how much that changed? You can see that now leaning towards yellow green. So what I've done here now, I've started with blue green, dark blue green, and now I was able to add the red orange into the blue green for the saturation. All right, now let's go through what I would need on my palette. That's the original question. What I would need on my palette to get this variety of greens. We'll go through it. What do I have here, and what do I need from what I have here to go on the palette? So we start out with the green. I would put the blue green on the palette. I know that's one color I need. That is the hue. And just for that blue green hue, I would need the full range of value. I've got that here, and now I have the ability to raise that value with yellow and with white. And I need the ability to desaturate, to control the saturation. So I have that control of saturation. I control the saturation of the blue-green with the red-orange, and by controlling the saturation of the blue-green with the red-orange, I also am able to lean it more towards yellow-green. So really, do I need the red-violet? I don't really need the red-violet because now I've got the red from the red-orange that enables that to happen. And I need the yellow. So that tells me now to get this range of yellow-greens, I need on the palette, if I start with blue-green for getting the darkest dark, those are the colors that I would need on the palette in order to get that. I would need the blue-green, which in my case is Viridian by Rembrandt, or you could use phthalo green. I would need the red-violet, which in my case is the Rembrandt Transparent Oxide Red. You could use burnt sienna. And I would need yellow, any one of the yellows, and I would need white. White is a given. You're going to have white, so it doesn't even figure in. So you see, with having that range of those greens, I'm able then to come up with all the greens I need here. Now, what about the next color? The next color we see here, what is the hue we're really looking at? So you see, you can identify the cone here, or is that what that's called? That little red thing, you can identify that as red or red-orange. Sure, but what about this? Well, you can see it's warm. You can see that the temperature of this, the color temperature is warm, and you can identify as on this side of the color wheel. But do you see red, or do you see red-orange, or do you see red-violet in there? Now, remember what we put on the palette already? We put red-orange on the palette, so I may already have what I need there. Let's see. Let's see if I do. So again, I'll go back to the little test strip that I used. These are just strips of paper. 3x5 cards. Actually, go to the dollar store and get and get 3x5 cards and just cut them into strips. Now let's do just a red-orange test. All right. Now we identified red-orange. It's almost a guess, but we can see just by comparing red-orange on the color wheel, that seems to be the vicinity of hue this lives in. And you see, if I put that on a test strip, let's get that a little bit closer to the edge. There we go. On the test strip, you can see lots of red-orange in there. Now, do we also see a red-orange there leaning a little bit more towards red-violet? Or could we use a little bit, could we go to the complement of that red-orange and use a little bit of blue-green in it? But we know that if we do that, it's just going to change the intensity. So let me just make that a little bit simpler for you. Let's just say, all right, up here we already discovered that red-violet plays a role in working with that yellow-green, or working with the greens. What if we put red-violet on the palette? Would that then give us what we need? And so if we reach for the red-violet, and we add a little bit of red-violet into the red-orange, and we put a sample of that on our test strip, and there you go. So if we want to make that darker now, because of what else we have on the color wheel, I believe we could reach for a little bit of that blue-green, and we could make it darker just by adding a little bit of blue-green into it. And they see, there we go. Because as it gets darker, you can see there, as it gets darker, it also loses some of its hue. So there you go. Now we know that we have whatever we need, that red-violet. Oh, by the way, so what do we do about this little comb here? All right, let's try the red-violet. Now you might say, well, let's just reach for red. Well, let's try Let's try something else. Let's try something we already have on the palette. Now there you go. Once you have a set of colors, a limited number of colors on the palette, such as we have here, and the way we figured that out, then the way to keep color harmony in the whole thing is to then see if you can use any of those colors or any combination for any other colors you might see in here. And you'll be surprised at how that will be possible. So if I then raise the value of that red violet by adding white to it, I'll just use the back of a palette knife to compare this, and you see it seems to need a little bit of the red orange in it. So let's put the red orange and see what that would do. And let's put a little bit more of that in and see what that would do. And you see that gives us close. Now at that point we could just add a little bit of the red orange, but we keep that color harmony if we reach for a little bit of the red orange in the high saturation. So if I put just a little bit of cadmium red light into that, and I want you to watch what happens here. Can you see how close we are? And then we still have color harmony throughout this whole thing. Now what have I gone through that we've spent a really long time here just analyzing color according to the wheel and getting there. All in the world we've done for each of these colors. We start out with the hue. What hue is it on the wheel? We want the value, how light or how dark is it? And that is the value scale. Wheel does not show you the value. Wheel only shows you the hue. So the hue, the value of that color that we're looking at, and then the saturation. And then we get the saturation by always going to the complement of whatever hue we're working with. Very simple. I've really broken it down in such a way that I hope if you could follow that, then see if you can come up with every color you need just with a limited number of colors. You can do that if you choose those colors by the way they behave as they're arranged, because of the way they're arranged on the color wheel, and how they behave when you add one into the other. That is controlling the amount that you add one into the other. So give that a try and see if it makes setting up your palette with the colors that you need a lot easier. Be sure and view all of our quick tips. And while you're doing so, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell so you'll always get a notice when we produce a new quick tip, which is every week. And if you have a question, leave it in the comments section and we'll make a quick tip for you. Also, take a trip over to DianneMize.com where I have full-length lessons, downloads, DVDs, lots of other stuff there, some free stuff for you. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and that way you'll always be informed every time we do something new.